Right. Okay. So we'll talk about assignments in a second. This, I know this is a terrible thing to look at, but no one looks at it. I don't think anyone looks at this particular page much, even though they kind of, maybe people do, but it's usually cases and all those things. And as we've seen with Omicron, and you just said there's a a reboot for Omicron. That's good. Omicron 2. But you know, this is the thing, and it's just rather awfully, I think, gone to 20 million, which is, you know, it's been ticking up 100,000 pretty quickly, and it's really in here. So we'll see. Of course, this is a estimate of what's been happening. I don't know, right? We don't know, and a lot of it is uncertainty about what happened in India. So if you see the total, it's really Asia is the uncertainty. China, we really have no idea. But per 100,000, where it really matters, you can see everything kind of starts to match a little more. There are different points at which things took off, even though it was really enormous here, of course, in New York City and the Northeast to start with, and Australia, finally. So it's taken off.
That in China, one person tested positive in some apartment building, and they locked down the whole building.
Right.
So that might have something to say for like an actual lower caseload, but
yeah, we don't know the numbers, but it's true that the responses are much more. And there are, I think, apps. There's a lot. You know, if you've been in a store and someone gets, you know, has a positive test later on, everyone gets a thing, and you get a red thing. You can't go anywhere. So
Apple released a pretty good data set pretty on in the pandemic. That was like how people
movement.
In certain critical.
Yeah, so Vespignani's group does that, works on that. It's I don't think they get it from Apple. They must get it from somewhere else. But yeah, and you can just see it just grinds to a halt, and then people, you know, and it's all connected, right? How much, I mean, there are the rules in place, but then there's sort of the courage that people have or the beliefs they have. They don't have it for China, though, do they? No. Right.
It was like a California.
Yeah, there are some data sets for China, though, I think. Yeah.
Everyone cites the one paper from China about elevator. That was the most scientific paper of all this time.
Which is so just an elevator was enough, because, you know, SARS was like this too. There's like one person in a hospital bed sneezing, and everyone's like, "What is this?" Which, in retrospect, just not great. Not great thinking there. Okay, I have a trope, so we'll move on from the fun thing. This is I'll just show you a trope. So this thing is just TV tropes is insane. It's full of stuff. Again, it's created. Buffy was the originating sort of, you know, the cause, because it's full of playing with stories or whatever. But this one you'll see over and over and over again, I think, especially in, you know, TV shows of all kinds and movies, that a found family, right? That you end up, well, there are a couple of variations. This is one that you're choosing as you go along. You're collecting the family you want, not the family. Maybe you were, I mean, so many of them start with orphans, right? Or, I mean, it's just, that's not a new idea. That's thousands of, and well, maybe we'll have the trope of fridging, which is pretty awful. Women are often killed immediately, like the mother or something. But you can just sort of see it, like Frozen. You know, Frozen's going along, there's some singing, and then the parents die on the sea, and you're like, yeah, you're going like, it's just going to make, you know, push the story in a place. Anyway, this is just you just see this coming from a mile away, where someone says, you know, we're your family now, blah 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 blah. People love this thing. Hey, kind of. Oh, that's right. And there's a bit of a variant here which is the fire forged friends, right? You hate each other, you'll go through hell together, such as a class, and at the end of it, you like each other. Right? But there are billions of these things, of course. So anime and manga, you know, like there's just, and of course this is not complete, but there's whatever generally people are into, you know, will probably get written up, right? So Buffy is everywhere because it's sort of the thing at the start. But is there anything here that you guys, given the anime interest the other day? Which one? Okay, so One Piece, right? Look, it's like a whole bunch. Many. So just in terms of TV tropes, right? You go to the thing, and then this is for One Piece, right? And it's got these are the big kind of character tropes, right? It's going to talk to you about, right, true companions.
It's also interesting because it has probably like really long-term tropes, since it's like 1,500 episodes and still going. Like there's
That's
definitely
1,500. Okay. Yeah.
and still like so like
Sure.
there's story arcs that like lasted, like
Yeah.
100 episodes or so, but there's some that like start in the beginning.
And they've remained intact. I mean, some shows really do, like, because they're writing, they don't know they'll be around next season. Things go wildly.
Right.
Of course, characters completely. There's some. It's admirable if something can. Of course, what is it, like General Hospital or one of those? There's some of those soaps have been on for like 10 decades, many decades, right? I don't know how they keep that coherent. And some characters have been on it for decades as well, which is rather amazing. So there's sort of you want to look at something that has some right? It doesn't kind of go all over the place, right? It would be probably pretty hard to study like superhero comic things because they just have so many different. I mean, people have done it, right? The Small World network story, that was, people like went straight to comic books and tried to find all the connections between characters, and of course there are bazillions. But they reboot them all the time. They kind of have different universes, and so anyway, this trope is I would say this is like super overdone. Like it's out of control. It's just such a safe landing place for a story. Like we're all family now. Right. And I'm sick of saying it. So all right. So okay. Those things. When we were talking about ethereal whooshing sounds the other day, which is great. Ominous music. Ominous is super overused as a subtitle. It's great. I mean, but it was Twin Peaks was what I was thinking of. That's where I first saw ethereal whooshing sounds. That was pretty disturbing. Okay, so fun things. This is fun. I'm going to show you this. This is interesting. This is about the naming of things. I've been trying to think about a little more about how to name. What do we? I go on about this. I suppose we shouldn't name things after people. Oh, I only have one free article left. Oh, I will use it wisely. I just found this from Googling, right? So there are these issues, right, where we keep making these things that last for, no time at all and claim they exist, but they eventually get names. So that's pretty obvious that this is, and I think that's because that's a place, right? So this is where it was created. I'd have to look it up, but for a little while to start with, they're just named using Sanskrit for like 1, 2, 3. They just sort of have funny names that are just right 1, 1, 3, just as placeholders while everyone argues about who or what it's going to be called. So you can see people get out of control, right? There's some efforts to. This is Octarine, this is Pratchett, this is the Discworld. It's the 8th color. It's however it's where magic comes from. But David Bowie, people are trying to put in things, and so there are a fair amount of Severium, Alan Rickman, yeah, but not J.K. Rowling. So this is a well done little thing. I don't know if you can. Maybe this is this a better one? Oh, I believe copy things. I have this watch that now tells me that you may have, like based on my sleep, which is always awful. It's like you may have trouble remembering things. It says stuff like that, and I'm like, okay, guy, like, why can't I copy that? Okay. Okay, this might be a higher resolution thing. Well, maybe not. Anyway, it's labeled. So this is a name source, right? So mineral in which it was found, astronomical body, mythology, person, place, properties. And I'm going to argue that the only ones that make sense are really properties, which could be mythology as well, right? So Mercury, kind of. But Quicksilver is a much better name for that, right? Because so the quick and the dead. So what's the quick mean in that weird kind of phrase? Because you talk about the quick and the dead, and it always feels like it's the one who, because like draws fastest is alive. But quick just means a lot. It's an older usage. It means alive. It means living. So the quick in your, we should just talk about words. The quick in here, right, in your finger, because it's a living bit that's growing. So So the quick and the dead means alive and dead. So Quicksilver is alive silver, which, it's Regal's, that's pretty cool. I mean, then we have to figure out why we named it silver and see if that makes sense. But, if you go back in time, they're pretty basic things. And they had some weird names before. There's some arguments about that. But they start to become named after people. But this gives you this, it's a weird spectrum, right? Because let's see, places are like here, this is Cyprus. It's hard to read this. So copper just means from Cyprus. Gallium is France with asterisks and oblates situation. Germanium, I mean, it's straight up. There's no Australian in them, which is fair enough. Fermi, Einstein. Now we're starting to Nobel, who made dynamite, and what good. That's Ernest. Yeah, and then they're named after. Ooh, this is punishing. These are named after. So heavenly bodies is an acceptable thing. So there's Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. So this element has to cease to exist. This is named after Russia. This is is that a property? So that's property. Molybdenum. That's a property, and so on. So, but it's a real mixture. It's kind of a straight. And there's potash, for example, lime, soda. These are places where these are minerals or things, properties. No, yeah, it's minerals that they're found in. Yeah. That seems reasonable, although that could be terribly misplaced because you find it in this one thing, but it's actually, if once you sort of discover the world or stars or something, you're like, oh no, it's actually that thing. But it is, there's Californium, Berkeley. I mean, so the thing to me is this is incredibly against that's so, this is, what's the word? Bigoted. It's deeply problematic. You're naming it after people who obviously don't last forever and could turn out to be not such great people, or which is kind of right, yeah.
Well, it's just the categories are sort of like they're like a little bit made up. Like
You mean this?
like how they're binning them, right? Because like copper being from Cyprus, that could be a property.
That was located, yeah, found in that area.
Yeah, and
sure.
Like the planet ones could be mythology, and the ones that are named historically where it says property, a lot of those look like they're from older names for something else, which like molybdenum being lead, presumably that's from something else that has to do with lead.
Yeah.
So like, how did that get its name? So I'm just
when you keep unpacking the words, that's fair. Yeah.
Curious, like if they made this chart like a stack or something, like a 5D chessboard situation. I feel like that would be extremely dope.
Well, you can definitely play. I thought it'd be fun to play around with it. I mean, sitting here, and of course, this article is kind of an attempt to just at least show it. And I mean, I just thought I wonder I wonder if someone's done this, right? And so this is a recent thing. And these are the rules. So if you want to name it, create something and then name it, then this is the rules. And I would say, this is fair, right? And maybe depends, right? Like, but this could all be folded back into the property is. This is a huge no-no. I mean, basically what's happening now is like large groups of people are trying to smash things together to make a new thing that they can name after someone. Which, you can say, okay, well, we get stuff done, but it could rip the universe in half. It's like, let's not make any black holes right now, guys. Or just keep it in your pocket. It's like, we might need it at some point. Anyway, interesting. But yeah, so there is a rule set. And I don't know when that came into place. Because this wasn't running around. When people were the alchemists were exploding themselves and other people in 1500s. Anyway, I thought that was a curious thing. Okay, so assignments 15, 16. So these exist on the website, and I know we're getting there slowly. This is instructions. I have that kind of functioning somewhat again, so you can come to this. Look at that loading so quickly. These are the ones that are on, and the idea is, to hand this one in tomorrow. right? And I'll try to sort out a better delivery system. In the past, I've had ornate naming things for PDFs that you would send to me or to Michael. So I might try that again. But there are things like, CSIS, da 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 da, and then things like $, first name, $, whatever. Now, I will try to make it really clear because people then send me $, first name, $, last name. So I just want to make sure, like, yeah. And then you will have your own list of them, right? Like, so you name them the same way. Oh yeah, that's right. All right. So this is Park sitting over here, right? This is this thing. So this we could also just spend all day talking about the tweets. This one is so it's relevant to last Parks. So I think these are undergraduates. Not that it, whatever. That's a huge school. I think there are 2,000 faculty at Wharton. It's gigantic. Anyway, so yeah, asked what the average American worker makes per year, and 25% thought it was more than six figures. I mean, so this is germane to the.
Phrasing. If they asked what's the average wage versus what does the average worker make, those are like pretty different. And one of them is way less stupid as a guess. If you're raising it way up because you're thinking, oh, there's some absurdly rich people who are pulling up this average. So it depends on how you're. So it depends on exactly if they framed it exactly this way in real life or not.
So I guess it is the professor. You would think they've kept the language the same because you're right. It changes a lot. I think they. Well, I don't know, but it.
I wouldn't call Jeff Bezos an American worker.
Right.
Well, yeah. I guess not. I don't know.
But yeah, no, there's definitely a lot of ambiguity.
He definitely works American.
His money exists. His money exists in a complicated state in the world. Yeah, right. So anyway, even this seems kind of high. My wife writes about inequality a lot, actually, for CBS. So she's always writing stories, interviewing people. I mean, it's very bleak. The pyramid has got a little tall and thin, and I don't understand why that's thought to be a good idea, but that's how I felt, actually. Yeah, right. So someone thought it was 800. Maybe they just didn't understand the question. I mean, maybe they just didn't understand. Like, what do you think? You're going to make, like, because people, I don't know. What do your parents make?
Yeah, my CEO dad is average American.
It's hard to comprehend. All right. Any other tweets?
It's really embarrassed millionaire though, right? Like the idea that every American's an embarrassed millionaire, and that's one reason like we vote against a lot of things in our self-interest, like fiscally.
Oh yeah. Sure, you're gonna make it up the pyramid. Yeah, you're gonna make it up the pyramid. Well, it's the story. Yeah, gotta protect the place that you're going to. Yeah, there are some famous lines about that. I think. Yeah, so it's well put. Okay. So those things exist, and this is the madness, right? So like I can change it over here, and then I'll make the new website. So it should all exist. And the idea is, okay, I know I'm taking too long. If you go to assignments, then they'll be here, and I'll make them due on Wednesdays. And so the next thing then is office hours. So we can do that Tuesday afternoon. Does that work? It'll be on Teams. Okay, what time? Let's just sort this out. What time? So let me say, and then you can tell me no. And I can set up. We'll do it today. There's 2:15 to 3:15, 2:30 to 3:30. I know it doesn't fit into the mad. You have a 2:30. You have a 2:30 end. So is 3 to 4? I just want to keep it an hour, I suppose. That would fit in the. What is that crazy? I've lost it. Oh yeah, here maybe. Yeah.
2:30 is cool.
You just have this one, right? You have this one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Yeah, but 230 is when you get out of that.
Yeah, yeah.
You escape from
But
chaos.
it's still better than 215, and there were only two options.
Oh no, I'm just like it's a dot dot dot. So we could make it all right, we'll make it 3 to 4. Okay. Let's do it. 3 to 4 p.m. Yeah, I'll put it in here. Uselessly. Office hours. Yeah. So Tuesday, so and then we can well, it's a change. It means things will be out for a long time. Like the next assignment is up and it's due next, 8 days from now. Okay, I'll set that up. Tuesdays.
And it's assignment 14 next, is the next
15 and 16. 15 is due tomorrow, 16 is due, yeah.
Oh, okay.
15 is just choosing the
Just writing down, yeah.
So you record podcast, I guess?
Yeah, I can do that. It really helps if one of you, I mean, I will try to press the thing, but,
It's just like I don't think I can make
oh, okay.
class. But if it's recorded, I don't mind.
Okay. Is it okay?
Yeah.
It's just like it should be in that, if it's going to be due on Wednesday. We could change more things, but I realize this is perilous. Okay, well, we can, yeah. And then you can speed it up, which you should be doing right now. Okay. All right, let's get back to happiness. And I wanted to show you this paper that I should have opened it before. This is economics. Yeah. So this is, yeah, there are a lot of little weird things in these slides. It's true, and I forget about them. This is the original paper that I found online, right? And it's a weird paper because it's this kind of object. I guess it was published in a thing. Basically, it's this little bit of instruction. This is what we did. These are the instructions, as I told you the other day. This is the semantic differentials, right? So this is the unhappy, right? You're feeling unhappy, annoyed, unsatisfied, da da da. And then it's got the same thing for excited, jittery, wide awake, aroused, da da da. So this sort of thing. And then this is controlled or in control. That's this idea. But then it's just basically a list of all the words and their scores, and they have it for the mean, the standard deviation as well as in. So you can see things, and we'll come back to that, right? So there are words that people don't agree on. It's an important thing. These are just alphabetical, which is useful, but I mean, of course, you want this online. But so this just goes through, and I think at the end, so it's broken into male subjects and female subjects, which have a small difference, right? So that's an interesting thing just to start with. That these are students, identify as male and female. That there were a few words here and there that sort of stood out, but nothing massive. Here are these ridiculous looking objects. This is what you worked with. And here they're showing, that's the end of it, right? Here this is, and we'll come back to this because it's sort of showing you that, that this doesn't look like something that it would be randomly allocated if it was, if these were really orthogonal things. And it is, right, so you can see men and women, they have this, it's a terrible blob. We're going to make these things later on absurdly call them oosiograms, but they'll be labeled so you can see, because you want to know, which words are where, right? So these are, you feel very excited here, very bored here, very happy here, and sad here. So these are exciting, happy words. We know what they are. But there's a little bit of a bean shape to this. So there are words that are kind of neutral. There aren't many neutral words that, are exciting. And so that's a bit of and we sort of see this over and over again. In some ways, this is like an intensity thing of the experience, right? So if you're really sad about something or really, right, it is stimulating, So it's a little bit of a funny thing. And this we'll get to it later on. These just turn out to be not really the orthogonal things. They're interpreted as such. But even back then, you can see there's some problems. All right, so we take this thing, and it was very much me just going like this and then doing things in Emacs until I got the stupid thing straightened out. Some horrors, regular expressions.
You already put in a whole spreadsheet or something?
I mean, this is 2007, you know, so I copied this thing, you know, because you could just do, depends on, like, if you do view, like maybe continuous scroll, so it's doing that, and select all, yeah, right? And then, you know, you could go to, I would love to have a little class where we do this sort of thing, like stuff, the text. Oh, did I copy it properly? Maybe not. Hopefully. Yes. So, you know, and then you go through and you're like, okay, we're going to start dealing with this mess. The first word, wow, this is terrible, right? So there are various ways to do this. You have to figure out, you know, are we, you know, you could try to dump it in, you could try to sort of clean some stuff off and then try to dump it into a, you know, you could try to dump it into an Excel, but it wasn't provided like that. So at least not what I could see. And often you find things like this, right? So you have to mess around with it. That could be a whole other activity, but you can see this is pretty terrible. And copying out of a PDF, what's happened, right, is this is even worse, I think, right? Now these are ordered, so you might have to write a little script really to break it up. Wow, that is terrible. Okay, so that's bad. I don't know if you can export file save as. Can you export as text maybe sometimes? No. Anyway, all right. So that's a nasty business. So and actually, this is using different words now, but I have made a little script eventually, like, you know, chicken. Right, so because it became kind of an issue, like, do we have a score for that word, right? So we actually have this because, and you can see where we got it from. This is the New York Times. Everything is lowercase, and you know, but that's a word that could normally be, you know, floating around. But we didn't have it in Twitter or Google Books, whereas chicken appears in, it's in Twitter, New York Times, and music lyrics. It wasn't in the top 5,000 of Google Books. We'll get to that. Yes. Yeah, no, I use Poll, and I apologize. Beef is a little bit lower. They are the ranks. So we'll come to, because again, it's if distribution is a rank. Like, so chicken, you know, is, you know, someone's a chicken, you can say these sorts of things. So it's actually pretty high up on Twitter. Now you've taken out, well, we had hashtags in there and usernames. So we had Justin Bieber, at Justin Bieber, because it was a top 5,000 Twitter word, and Jonas Brothers and Lady Gaga. I discovered that the Jonas Brothers broke up 5 years ago by looking at time series. Because the Jonas Brothers went like this, because I realized we had about 10 in this old data set. I'm like, oh, I wonder. I went, boop. I'm like, Google, oh, they broke up. But then they actually, yeah, they came back together. Yeah. It's pretty funny. Really went to zero. Like, they never got talked about after that. It was like people were sad, at least on Twitter. Yeah, they're like, no, I'm not going to even. Okay. So that's the originating object. Now, I share, you know, my God, I hate the whole public. So, by the way, $11,000 is what you pay for a Nature paper now to publish. I mean, you should look at it. It's amazing. It's just amazing. Oh my God. I talk about this maybe some other time, but open access journals came along, and the deal was, okay, well, you know, we're going to do a different thing. Everyone can write. You don't have to pay for the things. No one has to pay for it. It's open access. Libraries don't. But how are we going to support it, right? So, yeah, people. So you put it. You, the idiot academic, write a paper that no one pays you. Right? You send it to this place. More idiots come along and review it for free, and then the people come back to the first idiot and say, we will publish it. Now give us $2,000 or whatever, right? It's usually, I think, plus one was like $1,300 early on. But Nature has just in the last year, maybe a couple of months, said we have a new thing, it's open access, but it's $11,000.
I feel like this gives Nature incentive to publish all the papers.
Well, they're still going to they're still going to say we're published, but it's yeah.
Or to lower the criteria.
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of Nature journals as well, which is also part of the. I mean, how dumb are we? It's unbelievable how stupid this whole process is. Anyway, and we have the archive. Anyway, amazing. So you have to, yes, you have to pay money, and it is shocking. And actually, that connects into this story because we wanted to make this was early on with open access. It was in a Springer journal called the Journal of Happiness Studies, again found by Google, and I wanted to make it open access. So we said we ticked that box, and it was $3,500, which we had funds to pay for it, but it's just like, oh my god, like this is all wrong. Sickening. Okay, so we got to this, and we're sort of working on it slowly. This is like, so why is metal industrial down here, right? We've got the funny things where you read out the lyrics. Now, that's a problem. You can go and say, read out the lyrics for a few of these things. That's okay to do that a little bit, right? Just to kind of get a sense, is it making, so, but you can't really, like, you never want to write a paper and you say, like, here is a tweet that is emblematic of this thing, or here is a sentence that is emblematic. It's very perilous, right? This is that kind of mistake of the individual for the collective. You can try to do it, but you are acting, I think, in a way that's deceptive, right? You're trying to put a shine on it. And there are reasons, of course, just to not put, say, a tweet in, that's a whole issue as well. So that constantly comes up. We do see it in some papers, but we, with our students and our team, we've never published, unless it's a famous person, right? Like, unless it's like, president or something, like, who's really, it's an official record thing. So there's a privacy aspect, but and a misrepresentation. That's the deeper thing in some ways, is just that this is deceptive. This is not showing how we came across this score, right? Like, it's dangerous even to sort of show the Michael Jackson thing. But as soon as I put that screen up, it's like this is not something we would score. We wouldn't score one of these lines. It has to be a collective thing. And so these are massive level stuff, right? This is year scale for titles of songs. So, and just to go back, this was the overall trend, right? And so and I want you to realize there are problems with this corpora. One is, it's found online. It's lyrics that people wanted to put up. They're trying to do a good job, so there's going to be a little bit of, these are the songs I like. So there's a little, but, in this era, looking backwards. So there's a little bit of popularity built into it. But in principle, if you put up a song, the idea is like, that would be it, right? You wouldn't, we did find a few copies of some, but it's not like it gets indexed by, how many records were sold or whatever, right? So it's very muted in terms of true popularity. There's a sort of linguistic popularity, like what were the words that the authors were using collectively, but each author gets one vote.
So that, what you just mentioned makes me think, like, is there any relationship between word popularity and valence? Like, are more popular words more like...
It's a great question. It's a great question. Because you should think about it, because we'll get to it. It's a great question.
Because that would kind of explain if there's word shift,
right.
The valence would decrease over time.
Right. So that's a real confounding problem. This is with this original ANU study, which is 1,034 words. So there's a problem of the lens. Like, is it just a weird lens, right? It has pancakes and church and love in it. Is it getting more of this? Is it doing a worse job at one end here? Like, does it hit more of the zip distribution of words here? So that's tricky, right? That's another part of it. And it's a weird subsampling, right? So because it's 1,000 words that Eggheads made up, right? That said, we're sort of, these are meaningful, important words that are sort of put together. I mean, I'm saying, but it's fair enough, like, you try to do this, but it's an expert chosen list. It is not what the humans use in venues, right? So that's why when we construct a better instrument, we want to go and say, what do people actually use? What are the words they use? They use the word "the." of, and hugely, right? Okay, let's score them. Turn out to be neutral words. But I mean, we're doing the right thing where we're saying like these are the words people use. Let's get our scores for them. So now we can have less worry about that. You know. But it's still your initial question, like, well, it's unclear. More popular words, do more common words, so rare words versus common words. What's the emotional spectrum of those words? And like super rare words and moderate, what's the variation for those? What do you think?
I think people like to be happy, so they might use more high valence words more frequently. But that could be completely wrong.
So that fits in with what's called the Pollyanna Principle, which we'll come to later. And it's an older thing in psychology, and it's an observation that in interactions, not just words, so we'll look at it for words, but in interactions between people, there are more positive interactions than negative ones, which is a bit surprising in some, because there are wars and bad things happen, but generally society exists, and language is a gluing kind of thing with the yelling and screaming as well, but it's like there's a lot of very, social, like just connective stuff. Yeah.
Are more frequently used words more likely to be neutral?
So we'll come to it.
Because I feel like
But there's the top end, right? Okay, so roughly about, what is it, 150 words. If you take a text about it, and then take the lexicon, right? So the types and the tokens. So the types are just just the lexicon, and they're all then repeated in various ways. The most, and you can order them by how common they are. The top 150, maybe 50% of the text will be made up of only 150 words. And something like 20% might be 6 or 7 words, right? This is the skewed distribution stories, which we've seen a lot. So there's top 150 of basic function word things, really common. But then there are tens of thousands of other words. So there's going to be something at that top end. That's fair enough, like the and of and at. They should, it doesn't really matter what we think, but collectively, you might have some response to that. When you ask many people, different languages, those words are considered to be neutral. Yeah.
I was also thinking, even if it's not like an article or something, a word that is used often, like, that's an example, but one that's like used so much that it's both like.
Well, so swear words.
Yeah. So like,
Which, if you're on Twitter, like, yeah, they're very common words. Well, we'll see them too. Yeah, they're interesting.
Because like, you can use them very positively.
Yeah. Like where I grew up, every second word was a swear word, right? So they're function words. We didn't do it. We resisted doing it, but the geography of geo-profanity is sort of sitting there, right? You could just do this Twitter thing with like where all the swear words are and like how they go up. Yeah. We should dig that up. There's the geo of what you've probably seen this. That's right. Yeah, geo of word use. Yeah, which that's a really tricky thing to do well. Like which word, like do you know soda is being used as Coke? Like how do you figure out that that's what they're using, right? That's right. It's a right. Like a Diet Pepper. Dr. Pepper. It's good branding though by Coke. It's really good branding by Coke. Like it's like.
That's such a cool sentence.
It's a great moment for Coke.
Yeah, great moment for Coke.
And of course, they're all on the same team, really. I mean, I know they're big competing things, but the fact, right, they are together. All of their advertising says buy Coke or soda. It's called soft drink where I grew up. Fanta and Tab. All right, let's get to let's get to this. So this is the first effort to make these things are called word shifts, and I will show you a couple of these, but they'll get better as we go along. So why is there this drop, right? And we've talked about some possibilities, but why is there, basically given the words we've scored, why is there this drop? And this is comparing after 1980 to before 1980, and I think it is the lyrics rather than the titles, but it doesn't matter too much. So these are funny little things to look at to start with, but this is really, we want to put it in one line like this. We want to say there's some average score before 1980, some average score after, right? It's dropped. And so word usage just changed. So instead of just saying, well, it went down, you can say, well, word usage rates changed. They have different emotional scores attached to them, and we're just taking this simple average in the first place. We should be able to kind of, list which ones mattered the most. Yeah.
It's like, it seems like almost like non-intuitive to me to like look at words in this context. Right? There might be like a different context we could like learn more from, but it feels weird to just like look at like counts from A to B, or New York Times like over some like topic, where in this case it says it right. It's lyrics from 2007.
Yeah.
Over like relative to the lyrics of 1960, but like I feel like you're maybe losing a lot of context, but not that like you capture that like context of like what maybe influenced those words, but
Well, for sure. This is just saying, given this instrument, given we score by an average, and we, it's like, which we'll critique in itself, right? This is how it's functioning. This is what it's doing, and then you can ask all those questions. But it's like, why did this score go down? And it's because. Okay, so let me just try to interpret this. So these are words on this side pushing the score down, and words on this side are going against the grain, right? So there are words that are used differentially after 1980 that would make it more happy, right? Even though overall it's down. So this becomes a complicated thing. So there's some words are going the other way to, right? So there's less so let me just try to explain this. There's less lonely after, right? That's a more common word back, in 1960. Songs filled with that sort of thing. There's less sad, there's more life, more God, less trouble, and less loneliness. So that kind of fits. So these blue ones here are negative words that are being used less. And these two red ones are positive words that are being used more. So they add up to kind of make, they help the after 1980 sound, be more positive. However, they're up against a lot, and the bars indicate that really, this is the most dominant one. All of these ones here, and if you look at the red ones first, so it's love, baby, home. The color patterns are terrible. Love, baby, home, music, they're down. They're positive words, less of them. So that's hurting you. And then there are these negative words that are much more common: hate, pain, death, dead, sick, fear, right? So they collectively work together to make after 1980 by this instrument. This is not how we listen to music. It's not how it's like the big cloud of words going past you. Why is this thing scoring lower? And you can pull them apart and show them like this. So this is, and then, they all have, there are these four quadrants. So they've been swapped around. These are the ones that the bars are going this way. These ones on this side would make it happier. You can see they don't really add up so much. Love is a huge contributor, right? That word is just much less. It's a big part of it. These are the top words that are driving it down by being positive words that are used less. These are negative words that are being used more. So these combine. These are also positive words, but they're being used more rather than less. These are negative words that are being used less as well. So these would help after 1980.
Wait, so
This is going to be confusing. Yeah.
Is the frequency of the word which is going down, or is the valence of the word going down?
So the valence is going to stay the same. You can play around with that as well, where the instrument changes because somehow you've managed to measure how people interpreted things, and that, that's complicating. Like, that's a hard thing to do. That's in that package, that the paper with Ryan Gallagher. But it's really just about frequency. So how do we do this? Okay. So this is a thing to work through. That little image is the first one I showed you. Let me just show you where this kind of escalated to. this thing alive. Okay, so this is hedonimeter, right? This is our online version of it, and I'll come back and talk about it some more, but I wanted to show you that. So for example, here is a bad day, at least according to Twitter. And so this is a word shift. This is a much more complicated word shift thing that we have now. It's a JavaScript thing, and you can see the colors are different now, right? So yellow is positive, blue is sad. So that day, January 6th we're comparing it to the 7 days before, because you want to have some. It could be like a week before, because you need the day of the week matters, right? That affects things. So we need to do something like that. So we average this last 7 days, which takes a week cycle out. It's a bit complicated because it's going to have New Year in it, for example. But so these are the negative words, right? Violence, not is a negative word, of course. Shot, violent, arrested, protest. So you can kind of get a sense of that this is, telling you a terrorist kind of. It's being interpreted in that way. Antifa is talked about more on that day. You can play around with this, so you can see that should disappear. But these are the negative words. These are the dominant ones. These are happy words that have gone away. So, Happy New Year. Of course, we're breaking into words, which is a giant problem, right? So, but again, that we've worked on that. I don't think there's still a good way of doing this. You can go to the next day, see what happens there. You can still see that story is kind of staying there relative to the 7 days, but now it's including those days before, right, as part of the baseline. You could compare it to a year before or something like that. But it changes a little bit in its texture, right? So if we look at, say, the negative words, because that's really what's happening, there's violence, attack, banned. Maybe it's changing a little bit. Yeah, riots. Yeah, but it's really sort of staying in terms of what people are talking about. If you look at something like remember this, the Las Vegas shooting? I mean, essentially no one remembers this, right? That's a story that didn't stick. It's a horrific event, but was kind of gone in a couple of days. Like it's, you can see there's some memory of this here. This is unusual, right? We didn't see these kind of, this is COVID-19 taking off, becoming, understood to be huge. And then this is George Floyd's murder is here, and these are the growing protests. And that kind of slow relaxing coming out of it. We've never seen that before. Usually it's a bad thing happens. It's still talked about, but so much else is talked about that gets washed away at this big scale. This is all of English Twitter, which is very, very coarse. All right, so this is a simple thing, but I think is considered to be difficult. So we've got a comparison text. This could be anything. It could be books. It could be the first half of a book versus the second half versus the first half. It could be two different books. It doesn't have to be something in time. Often things are in time. Two different speeches, whatever it is. We just saw for Twitter, it's a day versus the 7 days before. So, and then the music lyrics saying, we kind of made these big lumps. So which words contribute the most to the change? So this is the structure we come up with, and we'll just sort of work through it. But there's some change in happiness. It could also be zero, right? It could be zero. Even when it's zero, there's still bubbling around of words in terms of frequency of usage. You can still do this. So this is going to be a normalization such that, and I'll kind of go through the derivation, right? So this is the absolute difference. And so this would explode if it was zero. You'd get into some trouble. But there's 100 to turn it into a percentage. And then the idea is we're going to say, it's the normalized frequency of occurrence, right? So it's probability. It's written as a probability, but it's the number of counts of a word I, divided by the total number of counts of all words in the comparison text minus the reference text. So that's a change in the relative abundance. And this is we'll use these arrows to indicate that, right? Because there's these 4 different ways things can go. So it means more probable or less probable. If this is positive, it's more abundant. If it's negative, it's less abundant. The word, so word I guess I've done that. All right. So then this is just the, so this is, connects to your point. This is the offline measurement of the happiness of a word, right? This is the thing that goes into the score in the first place. And we're going to subtract from that the average the average score of the reference text. So this is not a symmetric difference. That's a bit of a funny thing in here. The way to make it symmetric would be to join the text together. If you ever play with things like Jensen-Shannon divergence, that's kind of the plan. You join them together. You can just mush them together. You can worry about how you weight them, but if you say give them 50-50, you could do that. Then you could use that as the reference. Sort of the midpoint is the reference. The problem with that is you're really kind of going from a reference to a comparison. So you want to see why it's being pushed up and why it's being pushed down. And if you don't start with the reference average, you're going to get words contributing in weird ways. Because you'd like to see, if the score goes up, you want to see a very clear thing where happier words being used more pushed it up. Negative words being used less pushed it up. Like you don't want it, but they have to be relative to that reference. So it's interpretable, right? So you've got a reference score you're starting with. And why did it go up or down? Well, it's going to be about words that are happier or sadder than that reference, being used more or less here. So we'll get this thing to work. You have to, so the sum is going to be plus or minus 100, right? Because it's either going up or down. There's a zero problem, which we're going to ignore. And then we're going to rank words by this average, by the absolute value of the change. So that's why they're in this big soup together, right? They're ordered by absolute value of contribution. And you can break them out like this, but I think the problem, and it's good to have both of these things, but the problem is then you have to sort of look at all of this and say, is this one bigger than this one? And the JavaScript thing is great, right? Because it puts everything on one big space and you can kind of group them. But that's why we have stuck with this kind of arrangement like this. Now this will trail off. There's only 25 words. There are 1,000 words. And you get down to words that aren't used much, maybe in your text not at all. If a word is right at the average score of the reference, then it doesn't matter if it's used more or less, which should, that's the right field. Okay. Right, let's see if we can sort of work through this thing. So how do we get to that formula? So we're just going to take a very simple thing. We have the average scores of the comparison text, the reference text, and then this is just writing them out. This is very basic stuff, right? It's just like it's the average of word I, the average happiness score of word I, times its rate of usage or its normalized frequency of usage, sum of the n words for the comparison. That's all, right? So the lens, the way this, if you think of it like a telescope, it's going to let the words through for which you have a score. They're going to come in, and it's going to count them all up, and then turn them into these normalized frequencies. And every other word that you don't have a score for just gets blocked, right? Just doesn't come through the screen. Which is we're worried about at this point because we know we kind of have a funny list of 1,000 words. This is not quantum mechanics. It's not a crazy thing, but this is just it's just a little bit of delicacy, perhaps. So all we're doing from here to here is just the words, right? They don't change from reference to comparison. The scores are a fixed thing for this version of things. So we can just combine that, and now we just have that different. So that's useful because we want to kind of turn this into something where we have interpretable pieces. That's useful, right? This is just simply the change in relative usage. So that's good, right? And that's plus or minus. That's going to make sense. But we could stop here, right? It could be, we could just say the change in happiness is made up of all of these pieces. But this is just a positive number, right? Between 1 and 9, it's not really telling you what's going on with the, it's not telling you much. It's not telling you anything about the word's contribution given the word's happiness score. That's going to be just irrelevant. It's going to be whether it's just being used more or less. It's not enough, right? Because we want to know why it went up or down. And So the simple thing to do is to, and again, you could put any number. You could put 5 here, which is the average of this happiness score thing. You put 23. You could put whatever you want. So we can. What we're going to say is we'll put in a constant. I'm going to make it this average happiness of the reference text. And why can you do that? Because this is like leaving this part out. This is now just this constant, right? This constant is here times the difference in the probabilities. It's a constant. You can pull it out. And then we just have the sum of probabilities minus probabilities. It's really the sum of probabilities minus the sum of probabilities, which is 1 minus 1. So there was just a little bit of sneakery. This essentially is adding 0 in the great tradition of mathematical dubiousness, right? Okay, so, but it is a choice, right? It is a choice, which is like smushing the thing around to make it into something that we can, that can talk to us a little bit. There's sort of no getting away from the fact that there are these 4 different contributing, you could set up in different ways, but there's really this sort of 4 words fall into these 4, one of these 4 categories of contributing, and they may be helping the thing go happier, be happier sounding, and that's because they're happier words being used more, but they could be negative words being used less, and they could be, on the other hand, they could be making the score go down, and that could be because they're negative words, but relatively negative words being used more, or relatively positive words being used less, right? So once you have enough, it sort of should fit together. Let's look at this thing a little bit again. So there's you do a little pop-up, and you click on it, it gets it up. So this would have like, it's peaceful. There's a lot of U.S. stuff here, democracy, respect, right? White House, these sorts of things. Less talk about COVID and some other, terrible kind of words in here as well. It's just like, and this is partly, it's not that people maybe weren't talking about those things just as much as ever. It's just like there was a huge amount of discussion about something different. If you look at this gray thing at the bottom, you can see this is a total volume. And really, it's there's a click up here for COVID, but then a huge, there's an enormous surge here. This is to do with Nigeria, and Nigeria was banned in Nigeria banned Twitter for a while. There's a whole bunch of stuff happening, but again, this is these negative things. We're not scoring. We don't have George Floyd. We don't have names of people in here, right? So that's not working out. We'll see why Trump's not there later on, because we do have a score for Trump, right? And this is taking Twitter, it's breaking it into, it's taking all the English Twitter, like we have a thing for doing that, and then taking just simple words and lowercasing them, which is a whole choice, right? That's a whole thing as well. Let's look at something positive, right? This is where people say Christmas is terrible or Thanksgiving is terrible. But yeah, people are just saying the thing, right? They're saying it. It could be advertising, I don't know. There's stuff going on. It's just being talked about. And really, there are relatively fewer, negative words on that day. Yeah. So we'll come back to it. But it does seem well, I want you to think about when all of these negative events are, and this is just Twitter, it's not everything. Usually, something terrible happens, right? Of some nature, like Osama bin Laden being killed is a big drop, and that's complicated for people to interpret because it's like a day of celebration. But actually, it's a very negative thing happened to a negative. But so the way that's talked about is murder, assassin. It's like so it doesn't. It's not like 2 negatives make a positive situation. It doesn't work like that. It's just like badness. I kind of had a question there. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering, for those comparisons, do you filter out the most frequent words? Like the articles and stuff?
Yeah, so we'll get to that. It's a great question, and we will get to that because it turns out that's where you there's sort of this appearance of a tunable dial. Actually,
Yeah,
it's really nice. Yeah,
some weirdness here in how words shift or like shift graphs.
Yeah.
Baby stuff.
you got to take out at least 4.5 to 5.5, and I'll explain why that works. It's really a remarkable little bit of property, and it's again connected to all these questions about what the most common words being happy. You know, which one? How does that all work? Yeah, it's really good. Yeah.
Do you ever aware when you're looking at that to see days that had like one really positive event and one really negative event, so they're like both bars would be really long, but they
Yeah, we don't have it put. I don't know why we've never managed to do this, but another version of it is variance, and we haven't really added that to site. But variance is an interesting thing as well, and it yeah, it's you can see, yeah, there are some days where lots of different things happen, and it's yeah, like Charlottesville also had a concert, had Lady Gaga had a concert, and Zara, someone like, so it was just like, you know, not everyone watches everything at all, right? So they might have zero, like on Twitter saying, you know, Lady Gaga is the best, no idea that anything else is happening, right? So it's just sort of weird to see those things together.
like a nice like a long come final where one team loses and the other team wins and then half the people are happy, half the people
Yeah,
are sad.
we'll talk about that because that is possibly, there's definitely an example of a time when you can get spontaneous happiness and spontaneous collective happiness, right? Which is otherwise pretty hard to organize. Like it doesn't happen much. There aren't many like unplanned. There are no unplanned spikes basically in that time series of happiness. There are many negative drops, and we don't organize holidays of. I guess there are some bleakish kind of ones, but
Should we be planning for more holidays or will we get diminishing returns?
no, I think you've really got to have birthdays and stuff because otherwise you're going to get served up with bad stuff. Kind of to your point, but we'll come. Okay, I'm going to show you this. Yes,
I was wondering if you could like maybe like show up to all your data in like 1 hour time bands and then like
yeah, we have 15 minutes.
okay.
It's not shown on this.
What is clustering those time series look like on that given word? Like are you able to like infer an event solely off of like the words being used at the time? Or is
You know, and we've done it. We haven't really published that, but we've got some older work where you could see, for example, phrases. If you do phrases, right, you can see what's appearing. Like we just didn't, because this is a great goal, right? What are the stories that are emerging and how they're being talked about? But I remember we were able to get out like, and it's retrospective, you know, like feeding the tweets through in real time. And I'm very unhappy. We haven't done this yet, but we managed to get a thing that popped out: Boston Marathon bombing. And the way that kind of worked was, I mean, right, but the way it worked in time was Boston Marathon bombing, and then thoughts and prayers kind of appeared, and then send donations. Like, so there was this sort of, you know, like you could from a very far distance, you know, I mean, obviously it's being reported about, but the question is, you know, things that we all know about, you know, can if we can get that to work, you know, maybe we can get other things that are less obvious to pop up.
That could be dangerous too, like if you were able to like understand an event as it happened, and then you could sort of like build some sort of decision tree that says like after we see like this event,
Yeah.
these are like the most likely things that happen after.
I mean, yes, you know, and it is right. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I also sort of think social phenomena. I mean, some of it's very predictable, some of it's just ridiculously unpredictable. Like, and so sort of to that point, you don't have to follow football or anything. But this is. I really do like these probability of winning time series that unfold, right? I mean, and we've had some students work on these because these are little, you know, these are reflections of the stories. This was a game that, if you're into this stuff, you would. It was an exciting game, and lots of very high scoring, and it's getting to the point where Kansas City is probably going to win, but this is still, it's a rollover thing, right? So I should be able to. So this is, you know, out here, it's still only 70%. That's not, you know, for sure. Tells you the score as you go along. It's still 26, 20, and then it's still pretty good for Kansas City. But then suddenly, you know, there's a touchdown for Buffalo. But this is just in terms of this kind of happiness of, you know, people. That is a wild swing in large groups of people's collective emotional state. So Buffalo is happy. Now it's very sad. Buffalo is very happy again. Now it's now it has doom because it's like they lost the coin toss basically, and then it's just sort of inevitable death is kind of coming towards them. But this is oh, look, there are effects of this, right? There are studies of this. Forgot about it. Like I think with soccer, like in Germany, like visits to the ER after really tight, stressful games. The Canada did some study around it was a gold medal match in hockey between the US and Canada in one of the Olympics, and which was was it Vancouver, but it was what they looked at was the sewage system. And you could sort of see like when the periods ended and like there was overtime, and it was just sort of like it really affects the infrastructure because the game ends and all these people can relieve themselves, and in some cases go to the hospital because they've had a heart attack.
In the UK,
I mean,
they
what the hell is that?
The power at like halftime of big soccer matches.
Because everyone's gonna.
Puts their kettle on at the same time.
Well, it's such a weird So this synchronization of people was just utterly impossible until basically like the telegraph starts something. It's still not mass, but that's the first time you've got magical communication at a distance, and it's like tweet-like nonsense. Like it was sort of like little cryptic things that people, because you paid per word, right? So people started to make little funny the lexicons are pretty interesting for early telegraph. And then the telegraph owners were like, no, you have to use real words. You can't abbreviate. Pay us more money. But that's sort of a start of it. But then you get radio, but that's like one to many. And now we're in this sort of weird thing where you can like many to many. But yeah, but you're synchronizing people in ways that were just impossible, no gathering in crowds, but my God, wow.
Those news articles by topic, and then looking at like the general valence of the documents, but by topic instead of by like a singular text.
So if you look at here, we have a bunch of things. There's an outside one. This is the New York Times by section. So it's for 20 years of the New York Times. It's a bit different, but it's section, and this is why you have to be careful with these things. You can see there's more elaborate madness here, right? So this is society, why the society section is happier than the New York Times as a whole, and society is all of these, things happening in people's lives, right? So getting married, graduating, all this sort of stuff, a little bit of divorce. Oh, yeah, sure. Like how it goes through the day? Yeah. So the chirpy Today morning show stuff, right? And then, that. All right.
I feel like the talk show stuff's gonna be so much more charged.
If you need the time stream. If you could do it, it would be really interesting. I mean,
It also does put up 3 months of transcripts at a time on the Fox website.
Or I mean,
see,
if you get really good speech to text.
No, but I mean, right? No, it's a found thing. Oh, so target advertising. Yeah, I mean, it's all totally using. Yeah, sure. Look, I mean, people have been working very hard to do that for, especially with advertising for hundreds of years. So, and there are very capable people of my era, for example, who went off to, Silicon Valley and spent a lot of time thinking about how to keep people on sites. I mean, it was, really all the micro marketing, kind of marketing stuff, which I personally not really, but the like auction things that are happening in like tiny, which ads are shown to you, like all of that stuff, that's about who pays the money or whatever, but it's also, getting it towards you. I think this is a personal experience, but I remember Facebook back in the day, which I haven't used for years, but its ads were terrible. Like there were lots of fake stuff, and they were kind of terrible. But Instagram, I think they really, just as one example, I think they really, personally, they did pretty well. Like the ads that my cat is showing, they're pretty effective for me, which is really disappointing. But I always say, like, not appropriate. It's a cat. I put his real age in, so I think it got, for Twitter, and it got banned because I put his real age in without thinking. It's like, it's cat. He's 5 years old. It got banned. And I'm like, oh, I guess that was really rough. I had to write a thing. I think I had to send my driver's license, a photo of it, which feels like I'm now like in some fraud situation. Yeah, that was pretty elaborate. It's like probably harder than getting, citizenship. True. Which is acceptable. Catfishing is good. Okay, there's more in here, and this is just written out in words, what I've said clumsily several times, because it is a bit awkward, but it's there in text, right? So these little symbols, we have them float. Perhaps they've been deprecated. We've used colors more, but we've got a bunch of different things. There's the colors, there's these little arrows, right? So this is a negative word being used more, a positive word being used less. So these push things down. These things would push things up because the negative word being used less and a positive word being used more is the way to interpret those things. So this is about the relative valence, and then this is the frequency of usage. So that was a way to try to see. It's not even on, the plus is not even on that one.
That's the.
Do I have a? I'll come back to these. I've been skipping around a bunch of this.
That's the.
Let me just tell you this last. I have to kind of go back through these slides and pick out the things because it just took me a long time to get to the thing I was explaining today. But there are pieces I've missed. This is a early work, so this is a valence score for bloggers. This is something where we had a data set from LiveJournal, I think it was, where bloggers sometimes put their age, and maybe, right, if it really was, but they listed some demographics, so we had some information, and one was age. And then this is this average score, happiness score, and kind of has this trend, and kind of bend them because there are less people up here. But even 13 to 14-year-olds, which feels like a violation of something, but this is found data, so we could look at it. They report their year of, So what is this, right? This is like happiness goes up and down, and this is not. So self-reports. This isn't right. This is an observed thing. So and it's just blogs, and if those things have kind of gone away. So self-report studies. There's not a lot of variation in happiness with age, but this is kind of expected, this rise and fall. Sometimes, though, people have observed a U shape. If you ask people how happy they are, people in middle age are like not so happy. But it's very different if you ask someone versus like how do they express themselves.
I think this reminds me of a economics episode. I'm looking at David Blanchflower's happiness curve. Happiness levels are highest at age 16.
Yeah, the U-shaped thing.
Yeah, the U-shape.
So that's a claim. That's a claim based on asking people how happy, which is a pretty weird.
Yeah.
So the UK did this, and I know I have it on another slide, but I think at some point they were surveying 20,000 people every 3 months or something, and it's a phone call from the government saying, "Are you happy?" It's a weird interaction. It's a weird interaction. It's always relative. Yeah. Yeah. Reality is socially constructed. Yeah. Um, it's the greatest thing ever, right? Yeah. Yeah. It's the bomb. So it's just the metaphor. It's just yeah. So this is then. So what's going on? These are people who would be kind of in their middle age relative. As a reference, and the comparison is 14-year-olds. And so you see what does it make sense, right? And so sick hates. So sick is a complicated word, right? We could take it out because sick can mean awesome. But hate, stupid, sad, depressed, bored, lonely, this gives you a texture where you're like, okay, that sort of makes sense, right? So this is more in keeping with this is middle school. This is someone blogging in middle school. I mean, things are not good. Things are not good. I mean, it's bad being a human. I don't want to make light of anyone's existence, but and then these are things that they do say more that would help them, right? Happy, love, fun, right? Friend and people. They use the word timeless, but these, the texture of this, and the thing is, you can take this word out, sick, and it won't change that overall. So the big score is very robust. This is a much more sensitive thing. So this is kind of a weird derivative, right? This is like calculus with words, right? D happiness, dt. We're sort of exploding this the derivative thing out, and all the word like which bits point in which direction. So it's like a porcupine of calculus. So that metaphor doesn't work, but it's fun to say porcupine. And then this is an effort to do these little bar, to kind of tell you like how they add up, because there are all these ones missing down here. That was an early thing. This is a lot of MATLAB, which I never really released into the world. This is to show you how big the texts are, right? So there are less people blogging. The comparison one was larger. And this is what happens if this went down to 1,000 words, for which we have all these scores, and summed them up. This is now on a log scale. Eventually, right, the shift is minus 100, or it's a drop. This is percentage. This is summing them all up, and you can see by about 100 words, you've got most of the difference. This is to say that maybe 900 words are not being used. It's likely they're just not being used, relatively. So this this is an extra bits and pieces that does exist, I think, in the latest version for Python. But this was a helpful thing to see, right? Because we're not going to show this whole thing, and of course the word contributions become very, very small. They add up, but we want to know how much they add up. So this is a cumulative adding up using the signs. Kind of goes back the other way. So if you chopped it at 100, certainly at 200, you'd have all of the difference. So this is like the second round of these word shifts. So we call them word shift graphs and word shifts. And shift is like derivative, differential. Yeah.
This is definitely a stretch, and the answer's probably no. Has anyone ever attempted at creating like differential equations for the way sentiment moves over time?
Oh, I'm sure someone has done something.
Isn't one of the toy examples is that? It's a love triangle. The like, I think it's like a thing that Renz came up with, maybe? I could be wrong, but it's like two equations, and he was modeling a love triangle, whoever it was.
Is it Strogatz in nonlinear? It's nonlinear. Yeah. I mean, it's not here, but it's in a nonlinear dynamics book. Yeah.
Yeah, if you count that.
I'm just curious.
That's unhelpful, sorry.
No, it's fine. Well, there's this, but this is okay.
Well, you just don't know what's influencing it. That's why it's really difficult.
Well, so how do you, if you know it's getting better, you just, I don't know how you would know, like, I guess you know what direction it's coming from, but like, the way I see it, it's like a sphere of like how it's getting better with arrow points.
Well, so we've tried to do, I don't think, this didn't succeed, I don't think, but we have a paper called the chocolate transformation. So instead of Fourier or wavelets or whatever, there were chocolates. So the idea is that, the socio-technical time series are made up of these little, and sometimes they're rising things and they come back down like this, but there's also, and there's really not, right, I mean, this talk about prediction, right? Maybe sometime like in general, but nothing specific, right? But what's happening is, and there's a weekly cycle. So humans, right? So we've got the sun, the moon, and the earth going on. So that's reflected in Twitter. I mean, if you just had Twitter, you could probably figure, and you kind of knew there was a star next to this planet, you could figure out its time series, which is absurd.
Right. That's what I'm thinking.
And the moon, you could probably get that sorted out. That they have one moon. I mean, it's really nuts. You could back that out. But so there's massive clock stuff that's built into the background of it because there's a weekly cycle, for example, to happiness. Tuesday is the lowest day. But then there are shocks to it, and there are planned things, and they vary from culture to culture. I mean, we have many up here, but let's try. I don't know.
I was just gonna say, if someone knew the form or had a good
I don't know if
idea
it's
for the
working.
form of the differential equation, you could use neural ODE to solve for the parameters, and then like maybe get something that's like decent at forecasting what the general trend of the sentiment over time would be.
But the problem is that black swan events occur like in their.
Oh no, you're gonna get shockwaves for sure. I'm talking about general trend.
So, see, that's the thing. I don't know. This is yeah. So this is German, old German. I mean, you can see the pandemic is here. I can't tell you all these things. This might, again, these will be bad events. Terrible things that happen. You could do it in an actuarial sense, right? That there will be so many kinds of events, murders. These are terrible things, but that's it. Like this should be back here. Might be. It's a drop. One of these is going to be Charlie Hebdo. So this is probably the shooting, I think. And normally we would, if we have this fully done, we'd have like a link to it, but on Wikipedia. But this is, I believe that's what that is. And you can right, Christmas, blah blah blah.
Every year.
Yeah. So there are some big pieces in there, but socio-technical time series are weird things. A lot of predictability. It's going to be a big clock, but yeah. I don't know. Okay. So it took a long time, but there's a lot of stuff in here, and I'm going to go back through the slides and collect the things that I've missed. But the word shift thing is not a really but there are a number of choices in there, and it tells you a story. And here's the thing: once you become familiar with it, it's this incredible diagnostic tool. But just think of it as derivatives gone wild. Derivatives smashed into a calculus truck, smashed into a linguistics department. Yeah. What should we do? It's okay. What's that? Oh no, that's okay. No, that's okay. No. But like that would be a good thing to put together on the Teams website. Like maybe we could do that. Like.
We can do it on Teams. I think it'll
Sure.
be. I think on Teams doesn't it shows you everyone else's, so doesn't it?
Time to stop. That's the end of it.